Hello, what is happening, everybody? Welcome back to my channel, Rule of Two Review, and we are having a super fun and super exciting last-minute podcast discussion with a couple of buddies of mine about some pretty exciting news that happened today. I am, of course, joined by my good friend, Super Metal Dave.
Hey, what's up, man? Thanks for having me.
Of course, yeah. And AndresRestart is also back.
Hey, well, I'm glad to be back.
Yes, happy to have both of you guys because we got some pretty exciting Metroid news, and there's some jokey stuff to talk about with why we're even doing this podcast in the first place. Really stoked to have Dave and Andres back. Of course, both your guys' channels are going to be linked below, so you guys should definitely check them out. We're all, I think, a bunch of good resources for Metroid stuff and fun things. And so here's what we're going to do, you guys. Right before we started actually recording and going live for this podcast for everyone, Dave and I just found out that Andres is not aware of the actual reason we wanted to get together and talk about Metroid. Because, Andres, you said you were just working, right, at the time that
I've been working straight up all day. I saw your message, and I was like, all right, we're talking about Metroid. Dope.
Yeah.
But I didn't know there was a specific Metroid thing. I thought we were just talking about, like, Metroid at the Direct or something.
Yeah. There is a Metroid thing, which is what's really exciting. So we figured we would wait. It is so fun. We figured we would wait to have Andres have a chance to kind of just look at it himself before we start diving in. This was Dave's idea, like a live reaction. So, Andres, what happened is if you go to Twitter and if you go to Retro Studios' Twitter account, you're going to see. Yeah. Now, it's not the hugest deal, but it's a huge deal.
I'm scared to even go on Twitter. Oh, God.
Just go.
I hope I don't blow your mic out.
It's okay.
Okay. I'm on Twitter. I'm going to search Retro Studios. I should be following them, but they don't really tweet much.
They don't.
You better
and
follow
they didn't
them
tweet
now.
this. You're going to. Yeah, everyone has been like, oh, my God. Because this is
Why is it not even come? Okay, there it is. There's a check mark. I can't. I don't. I'm like scared to look.
Well, don't look through their
pinned
tweets. Just look at their profile. And you'll see an officially posted.
I see a banner.
Yeah.
That's the banner. Look at what that banner is.
Open the banner up
Look,
if you can.
okay, I have the banner opened up. It looks like Samus down a very dark hallway.
Yes. So, that's the update. That picture was updated only a couple of hours ago. And if you started if you started scrolling through your Twitter, you would see everyone really reacting, Dave and myself included.
You know, it's funny. I was planning a Metroid video for this Saturday, and I was trying to decide if I had enough material. I do now.
This is it. So this is a big deal.
Oh my God, my mind is spinning.
It's crazy, dude. It's really crazy. And so let's get the elephant out of the room, okay? The jokey elephant out of the room. Are we three Metroid nerds that are about to record a 1-hour podcast about just a picture that was put in the banner of a Twitter account? We definitely are.
Absolutely.
That's what we're gonna do.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
We are, because honestly, this I think is really exciting. I have a ton of thoughts. I know that we all do. So what I'll do is I'll give you guys a chance to kind of chat for a little bit here. So I'm gonna pose a question because I think that there's a couple of things this could mean. The big thing is this is this really a hint at something significant, or is this just a random thing that means nothing? I have my opinions, but I want to ask you guys. So Dave, I'll go to you first. When we saw 2-3 hours ago, whenever this thing, randomly, Retro Studios, who, like you said, Andres, they never do anything except for job posts. They suddenly update this picture with an official piece of art that we've never seen of Samus. Do you think that this means anything? Like, what are your first thoughts when you saw this?
It took my breath away. Like, I was like shocked. I was like, no way. They actually posted this, and it's Metroid Prime. You could totally tell it's Metroid Prime. Obviously, it's Samus.
Yep.
And the corridor looks like Metroid Prime. And I do think this is, in my heart of hearts, my first instinct is like this is Metroid Prime 4. Because I know because that's their officially announced game that they're working on. The Metroid Prime trilogy or remake, whatever, remaster stuff, it's just rumored technically. So I do really think this is Metroid Prime 4, at least like CG art, most likely. Mm-hmm. And my reaction was like, it looks awesome. Like the art style is exactly what I wanted. It was exactly what I was hoping for, because I remember they were hiring guys I used to worked on Crysis, and this has like that flair. If you play that one level, if you ever play Crysis, I don't think you have, Rob, but
a little bit. I played it a little bit.
There is a level in Crysis 1 where you go to invade the alien ship, like inside, inside the ship when it gets all like icy and stuff. This has like a similar look to it to me in that corridor from Crysis 1, which is great. I mean, I love that sci-fi like dark atmosphere that game had, and putting that in the Metroid Prime universe would be absolutely amazing. I would love that. Also, my reaction to Samus is that I'm assuming that it's Samus, by the way. Like, we can't see 100%.
It could be looks, a trick. Yeah, they could be tricking us. Yeah,
it could be like a dark Samus thing. But I mean, if you look very carefully, you can still see like the lights. It's not just a silhouette, right?
Yeah,
like, there's actually some detail on.
Yeah,
there,
you can see the joints and everything. So I do think that's Samus, but there's like a really long dark shadow cast by her as well. So that's kind of, I don't know. Well, I guess we're gonna find out. But this looks like it could be hinting at a dark game, because I remember they were flirting with that with Metroid Prime 2 and 3 in some areas. But so yeah, I would be to the moon excited for a dark take like this. This is exactly what I would want. So yeah, I love it.
Yeah, it's hard not to love it. Andres, you were just saddled with this out of nowhere 10 minutes ago. But now that you've seen it and you kind of know really what we're talking about and why everyone's kind of excited, I mean, just what are your initial thoughts? You have the freshest thoughts of all of us. So just, you mentioned a couple, some of the when you zoom in, you can see some details that it's more than maybe just a silhouette. Just overall first impressions. I mean, what are you thinking?
My first impressions have already evolved to like an entire novel in my brain already. There's a lot here. To Dave's point, there is a certain amount of detail and darkness there. So, one, I'll speak to the darkness point. Like, that was the first thing that jumped out at me. I think what this suggests, assuming this is for Metroid Prime 4, which let's speak to that first. This is for Metroid Prime 4. I 100% believe that, because I do also believe that we're getting Metroid Prime Remake this year. Obviously not confirmed, but I do believe that. I think it's a high likelihood. And assuming that's the case, right? I don't think this is Metroid Prime Remake, because Metroid Prime Remake is a remake of a game we already know about. This does not look like anything specifically in Metroid Prime, just more of that universe, right? Yeah, I think this is specifically for Metroid Prime 4. But what this also tells me that this seems like the beginning of the Metroid Prime 4 marketing cycle. And a big thing I've been trying to talk about in my videos is that Nintendo seems to have a plan. Like, you saw how they pushed Metroid Dread, and then they had free DLC for Metroid Dread Now, which I think implies that they have another Metroid announcement at E3, which I think is at least Prime Remake. But now with this, it might be like a dual thing. They'll show Prime Remake, but they'll also tease actual some gameplay for Prime 4. So then I feel like this is kind of the beginning of that marketing cycle, which gives me hope for a 2023 release for Prime 4. It's that's... Yep. I take all of that away from this image. And then, yeah, I think it is going for that dark atmospheric thing, which, again, if you look at how Nintendo handled Metroid Dread, I understand different developers, but I feel like, there is an understanding that they're demonstrating with Dread, and even now with this image of what Metroid should be about. And it should have that dread element, that fear element, that sort of darker atmospheric element, that mystery. Teetering on the horror side of things. I mean, not full horror, right? Like Resident Evil, but some fear elements, like really building on that. And that is clearly an influence here. There's this dark shadow, as you mentioned, Dave. It might be Samus, but it might be more than Samus, right? Yeah. And as you look more and more into this image, it's not yes, it's clearly. I think it's clearly it's concept art, right? It's not actual footage, but it's very detailed. It's subtly detailed, but if you look carefully, it's not just Samus's thing that's not just a silhouette, but actually detailed. But even in the background, you can see this goes far back, and there's structures in the background.
Yeah,
it's not
dude, I don't mean to cut you off, but I was doing the same thing, zooming like crazy, trying to see I wanted to see a door that that we would recognize from the Prime games.
I got
and I don't think Yeah, I don't think you can see any of that back there, but to your point, Andres, you can see it goes really far back and just the vaguest hints of some kind of structure, right? You can see it back there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if this will actually be in the game, like this actual hallway.
Tough to say. I mean, it
Probably
definitely
something
has
that looks similar. Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely might.
It's a big hallway.
It's
right?
a big
like,
hallway. Yeah, and it's
we don't expect Prime to be maybe open world, but like there could be like a lot of like larger scoped areas, and like we didn't really see hallways that would extend this far in the original Prime trilogy, right? Like you had open areas.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think people can sometimes forget that the maps, the overall map layout, like the real estate to walk across in all three of the Prime trilogy games, is definitely kind of a mix of, honestly, some pretty small, thin corridors. Mm-hmm. A lot of times, literally just door to door, straight line or like a wavy zigzaggy line and whatnot, that then open up to much larger rooms. And some of those larger rooms connect to other larger rooms. So you have like rooms or areas that feel open within themselves. But then when you really traverse from area to area, you are sometimes walking through smaller corridors or little hallways and stuff like that. So to me, we could very much be looking at a concept of an actual area in the game. And I don't think it's crazy for this to be some kind of like a long hallway that could be a door on each end or something like that. Or honestly, with the technology of the Switch, if you think about it, the more modern technology, these could be hallways that lead into rooms without the need for a door, which if you think about it, for a Metroid Prime game, given how the first ones were made, that would actually be novel. Because those doors, very famously, we all know this, everyone is familiar with this, they were a clever way at the time to hide the loading of the information in the area and the detail and the enemies and whatever behind it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's a great chance that, depending on how they direct this game, that a hallway like this could literally just lead to a big open room without having to wait behind those doors or whatnot.
Do you think they're going to do a Monster Hunter?
Oh, very likely, yeah.
I mean in the sense, like, an original Monster Hunter or most of the previous monsters before World, like, it was section zones, and then you go to another zone, it would have a straight up load. They didn't hide the fact that it was loading. They would hide it. But it was also, not only was it loading between sections, but it was also a gameplay mechanic, right? Because you would use that to sort of hide from enemies.
Right.
Yeah.
Once you move off the world and rise, enemies could follow you.
Yeah.
So how could that maybe apply to Metroid Prime 4, where, if I remember correctly, you could use doors to get away from enemies there too, right? But if Prime 4 does away with doors, that threat becomes constant.
Well,
definitely
pursues potentially.
In my point of view, I think they'll still have doors, of course. Like they got to have doors on some of these structures, but like maybe they'll just have more, like less of them, basically, and make more sense to like connect certain areas without doors. But I do still think they'll have like the iconic door, at least in some parts, just because
they have to.
Yeah. It's Metroid, right? So
that's how it works. I do want to speak myself a little bit more directly to the picture, though, and I do think it's worth noting. Obviously, like you said, Dave, they could be tricking us. There's a great chance that they're tricking us. But you also said something that I think is worth really pointing out, is how you mentioned you can tell it's like Metroid Prime by looking at Samus. I don't think I've seen enough people. I mean, it's only been 3 hours, to be fair, but I don't think I've seen enough people really focusing in on that. I absolutely agree with that. This is 100% Metroid Prime and nothing else, because to me, and I also don't think it's Dark Samus. I mean, it could be, but I don't think it is, because her shoulder pads tell the entire story. That is the Metroid Prime version of the Various suit, and you can see the little kind of like little scoop, little pointing out little things on the sides there. If you look at that, our view would be her right shoulder on the right side. That is definitely the Metroid Prime version of Samus's suit. And it's an important thing to point out, right? Because the Various suit and her suits have distinct looks from all the games, first person, third person, 2D, 3D, whatever. And there's no doubt in my mind we're looking at the Prime Various suit, right?
I agree.
So
yeah.
And so to me, I mean, it's like we already know this, but when I stop and I tell myself and we really think about this, I mean, think about it, you guys. We're looking at truly, without question, no debate, the first actual official concept and promotional art for Metroid Prime 4.
Wow.
That's what
I
this
just realized something else.
Yeah, what?
So, I mean, maybe it's not a big deal, but I feel like it's worth noting. The color palette for this image matches the initial Prime 4 announcement trailer.
Yeah, the blue tint,
the black and the dark blue and the blues, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and that to me, I'm gonna have to defer to you guys on this because you may or may not know I'm pretty colorblind, so I might be off on this. But the way I look at this kind of blue and the blue from like the announcement trailer that you were talking about, it also to me looks like, and I might be wrong here, but it looks like the same color that Phazon has always looked. Is that true? Does that match with you guys?
Yeah, no, it's pretty close.
Yeah, you know,
Okay.
I got some vibes of Phase, like the last level in Metroid Prime 3, a little bit from the color, and even like some of the design. But like even then, I don't think so. At the same time, just because it still looks a lot different. But
okay.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily for Phazon. The color, I think the color is pretty close, right? Color-wise, right? But I just, I don't know.
The color it reminds me of more of the light shafts from Aliens, from that movie in the 80s.
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys have
You
seen
mean
it.
that famous, super classic, amazing movie?
Yeah, but like how those blue light shafts and the darkness they had in Aliens, it reminds me of that, and it reminds me, of course, of Crisis. That type of art style.
Yeah.
So like I don't see any indication of Phazon here, but like the color, Phazon's blue, so I mean.
Yeah, and let me clarify. I think I was talking less in terms of this actually being like Phazon present in the picture, but more if they were tonally and with a color palette trying to echo where a story may be going. The sole fact, I've said this personally since day one after Metroid Prime 4 was announced. Like, okay, if they're making a new Metroid game and they're calling it Prime 4, that means just by default of the name itself that it has to continue the story of the first three games. They're not calling it Metroid Prime The Revenge. They're not calling it Metroid something different. They're saying Metroid Prime number 4. So if it's continuing that story, that means elements of the trilogy has to exist, such as maybe the Metroid Prime entity, Dark Samus herself.
Sylux, I think, will be a part of it there.
Sylux very much could, and of course Phazon itself, like the material Phazon and what the Space Pirates were doing with it. And so...
Right.
So this is more like, were they just trying to subtly hint that there's an overall visual tone that's going to mirror Phazon as a story element and the Space Pirates and Dark Samus and that whole kind of corruption? Because I feel like this gives me more of a corruption vibe than it does from Metroid Prime 1 or Echoes. Just based on my kind of... I don't know if you guys agree. I mean, even the shadow element that you guys point out, it's a good thing to point out. To me, that could possibly be echoing the concept of Samus and Dark Samus, even their story in Metroid Prime 3, and even the cover of Metroid Prime 3, right? Maybe they're doing something with that.
There's a lot of different things. That's definitely a possibility. I mean, it could be a number of things, right? Like the first thing when I made that observation about the matching color palettes between the initial sort of announcement and this, is that maybe it's a suggestion. And again, we're talking about colors here, right? So maybe not. But I feel like it might even be a suggestion that whatever they were sort of planning initially from a story perspective, that's still kind of carrying over to this project, right? Like Kensuke Tanabe has been at the helm regardless, right, of the initial effort and this one. So I want to think that some of the story ideas will still translate over, right? Like Sylux being involved and whatever, maybe that Metroid that was stolen at the end of Federation Force, which maybe that becomes the next Metroid Prime, right? And maybe to your point, maybe they do find a way to bring Phazon back, and maybe this is foreshadowing that, right? Like, I think that's all possible. But then from the shadow perspective, right, like, maybe that is alluding to Samus, or a Dark Samus, I should say, or maybe some sort of ominous force. But I really like how there is these light shafts and things like that, as you guys have been mentioning, because, I mean, what can you do with that? Like, things could hide in the darkness, right? Like, if this is going to play more to the horror elements, there could be things hiding. And notice how this hallway is a lot wider than previous hallways in other Metroid games. There's more room for things to kind of come out of. And this is a very long hallway, one that you could perhaps be chased down, right?
You know
we
what
see
this
this
hallway...
long shadow extending into the foreground. We don't know what's there.
Yeah, you know what this hallway kind of looks like to me a little bit, especially if you zoom out. I don't know if you guys are looking and zooming in and out, but that's kind of what I'm doing as we talk. If you zoom out and really look at it, it almost looks like it could be, what's the word? Like a runway for like a ship. Does that make
I was
sense?
thinking sewage or subway. Yeah, one or the other.
Well, yeah, like the subway concept, like a vehicle or like
Mm-hmm.
a ship could land or exit from a location through this. And I mean, it's weird because why would they show her standing in that? And it does look like there's a walking path. But the shape of it, and with those light kind of tunnels kind of going off into the distance, it just kind of has that look to me. I don't know if you guys see anything there.
It looks like the more I look at it, it reminds me of an alien ship that she's exploring because it has like a very alien look
Yeah.
to it, and like
An organic kind of touch to it.
yeah, taken after aliens basically. Like it has a very similar like feel to aliens to me, like that ripple effect on the ground. It just reminds me of that. So like she may be exploring an alien ship that's connecting to a planet. She may be exploring an alien space station. It's hard to say, but like it's certainly awesome to see it and to imagine, what it could be, right?
So
Well, you notice how the middle part, right? It dips down like a curve.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned sewage earlier. Like I wouldn't be surprised if this is like a sewage channel, maybe in a space station, or or I mean it could be a subway too, one or the other. But like it looks like water could kind of come down like these different sections, because if you look carefully, yeah, we see like the blue light, like so every time we see like that light blue, that's where the light's kind of shining through, it seems like. But if you look under the blue light, there seems to be like a divot per light almost. It's like maybe water comes down from there.
It does look like she's standing in, it could be a walkway, or it could be kind of like you're saying, Andres, like a liquid pathway of some kind, where like lava would travel, or some kind of water
Something.
or material, or phazon, maybe phazon, liquid phazon.
What if it's a phazon like facility? Yeah, it's just like that's crazy when you think about it. Like actually, if you look very carefully, because you know how I mentioned divots. I think that's actually, I can confirm that, because if you look carefully in the foreground to the right, you can literally see that it's not.
I see
it's
what you're.
there.
Yeah.
There, and I feel like it's sectioned off. And if you look carefully, you can see that. So I do feel like there's maybe something that does pour into the middle, maybe lava or phazon or something, and that also gets me thinking, maybe this will, if this is actually representative of maybe a room or a hallway in the game. Maybe at one point there is liquid, and you can, when you do something in the world, that liquid comes back or it leaves. So that it could be a hint towards a changing overworld.
Yeah.
I've only seen that in Metroid Prime, right? Like when we defeated Flagger, like that impacted the water.
The water became safe.
Lost its poison.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it could be something like that. there.
You know what I'm noticing about the shadow is that the shadow, it doesn't actually match the figure, does it?
No, it's a little off.
The arms.
It's reversed.
Yeah.
It's reversed. So it is dark.
Wait, is it? Are you sure?
Yeah.
Well, look
Yeah.
at this. Look at
I
the shape
see
of the
that.
arm. The arm doesn't look like it's
Yeah,
matching her arm on the.
So
I don't know. Now I'm like, are we getting into too granular? You might be right, but I'm like, how nerdy are we getting here? It does look
it's
like
one of those things where like it's subtle enough that it could go either way.
It's
Yeah.
questionable because like
it's
the
worth pointing
arm
out for
doesn't match the cannon shape. It looks like a hand.
I see
I
that.
agree.
I do see.
I agree with
That's a
that.
good darn point. And I'm trying to
And
look
then
at
the other one kind of curls in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it almost looks like you would think what we're seeing as the right arm on the right side of the picture almost looks like it's like a hand on the hip kind of thing. And she's clearly not doing that with that hand and the way she's standing.
Yeah.
So
this,
it could be like an angle, like the light is changing the angle of
Yeah.
things to make it look away,
Sure.
or it could be purposeful.
But also there is no light source really to create that type of shadow necessarily. The light's pointing down. So like, I mean, you know what I mean? I think it's very purposeful what they're doing here with this shadow.
Maybe.
That's just
It's pretty
my-
It
dark.
actually
my
gets
opinion.
darker. It gets darker as it go further in, right? That's kind of weird. Like it is kind of like a black thing, like right at the foreground, and it sort of fades. You see, like if you look in the middle, like it's faded, right? Like if you start at Samus, it's dark. It gets lighter, and then as you progress to like the immediate foreground, it gets darker, right? So maybe to your points, like there is a hint of something else, and it is arguably warped.
And do you
So,
notice that too on the
you know.
on the right side of the shadow? It turns into this like blob kind of like shape.
Yeah,
Oh, I do see
yeah,
that,
a
yeah.
very blobby, very maybe parasitic, perhaps, or
I don't know.
It's tough to
Yeah.
say. I mean, at this point, looking at something like it's really tough to say how much. But you know what though? Something that works in our favor.
I kind of believe it, though.
Yeah, something that works in our favor for getting that granular is like Nintendo and Retro, they know what they're doing, and I think that they knew. Like, this was such a calculated choice. Like, you could argue, and we'll get into it at some point. Like, you could argue this is just random as random could be. And it was like, oh, we're making a Metroid game. Why not? Well, here's this picture of just random Samus, and maybe it doesn't mean anything. But I don't think that's the case. I think it was purposeful. I think we're all kind of buying into this idea, right, that it was purposeful. This is a hint. This is Retro slowly making moves to prepare the world for an official announcement. And if that's true the way we think it is, that means every single detail they chose to put in this picture, they knew people like us would just go nuts looking at every little thing. And so every design choice with the shadow, the way we look at it, really could be something that they knew some folks like us might notice. The arms look weird. The arm cannon looks like a hand. There's a blob on the right side. It gets darker as it goes. All this stuff we're pointing out.
Yeah.
I mean, they would have known people would notice it. So if they didn't want it to say anything, there's a good chance they would have made sure it wasn't that way.
I do want to play devil's advocate. I'm with you.
Definitely, please.
I'm with you, but I'm playing devil's advocate because
we should
I feel
do
like
that.
It's fair.
We should do that, yeah.
Remember Watermelon Mario?
Well, yeah. So I do remember that, and I think that was a great example.
A completely new render
that
just came out of nowhere. We had rumors of Mario Sunshine, so I mean, I am guilty. I always try to balance it out with maybe not, but
all pretty
I definitely
guilty
talked
of that,
about it.
Yeah, we're guilty of that stuff.
I was like, is this a Sunshine remake or reimagining or something?
But that was also a tweet in the summertime by Nintendo saying, have a good summer. With Mario,
and this is February, so this must be like
and this is like concept art from Retro Studios on their banner page for their actual Twitter account. So. Yeah,
and
it's the one game we know they're making.
Context makes a big difference. There's a big difference in context for both images.
For sure.
And so that makes me want to. It's sort of pseudo devil's advocate and pseudo going down the same path we've been going down. What if we step away from whatever elements about the actual game this might tell us? What if there's a chance that, let's pretend that, this is really what we think it is, and it's literally a tease for the fact that Metroid is coming, and sometime this year we're going to show you about it. What if nothing in this picture is actually meant to tell us about the game, and it's just a really cool, dope-looking image of Samus that they wanted to kind of just share, knowing people would see it and get excited? And part of the reason I ask that is for all of the zooming in and examining details as we can do, it also to me has an air of introduction. Out of the distance, finally the return of the bounty hunter comes, kind of thing, So what if it's not look at the details in the halls and the lights and the shadows, just Samus is finally coming out of the darkness to reveal herself again in a Metroid Prime game? Does that resonate with you guys at all? How do you feel about the way this image might say that instead?
For me, I think it might be a little bit of both. Like they may have picked an area of the game where they are working on, and this is the actual visual style of the game, but they actually made this concept art to be kind of like an introductional preview of Samus returning in Metroid Prime 4 in a area that will be in the game actually, maybe. Or at least the style of it, and also hinting at a dark presence maybe as well. Because they did something like this, I believe, with Metroid Prime 1 and 2. They had like some promotional materials that were not like in the game, but like had the same feel, Mm-hmm. So I think that might be where they're going with it.
Yeah, there's a huge part of me, and I want to hear your take in a sec too, Andres, but there's a huge part of me that does also think it might be more that than anything else. Like, don't get me wrong, I love looking at every little pixel of this thing and trying to find the hints at whatever the game might be. And there is a huge chance that this is giving us hints at the actual game. But I also, in many ways, lean towards this just being just a subtle, maybe not subtle, but just a soft tease. Because, we can talk about the darkness and the shadow and the silhouette and all that stuff, but if you think about it, since they haven't officially given us anything big like a teaser or a trailer or an official screenshot, if they wanted to make their first subtle tease at the game, this is a way to do it by keeping Samus in the shadow. by putting her, forefront, that's a bigger news story than anything. Now we're actually seeing Samus in the light and seeing her in all her glory. This is such a very small in the background. She's completely in the dark kind of thing. So that's where I lean towards, like, maybe this is just meant to be like a cool little hint and a soft reintroduction in the dark of this character before the full veil gets pulled back later. So, I kind of go both ways too. But Andres, I mean, what do you think about the idea? Where do you go with that?
So, I'm inclined to also agree with Dave that it's probably a bit of both. But, I'll say that if you look at, there's a lot of concept art for Zelda games and Metroid games, Mario games, and you see that concept art after the game comes out. And maybe after seeing it in hindsight, you can see some connection, but if you were to see that concept art before the game came out, you wouldn't be able to draw too much from it. It doesn't really give you too much information, right? Mm-hmm. So, it's totally possible that this is just one of hundreds of pieces of concept art that they had, and they're like, hey, we're getting relatively close to start talking about this game.
Yep.
Let's tease them with this, and it doesn't it may have some very, very, very subtle references to maybe their design or like thinking or concepts that they sort of lead to something, but it's so vague that we can it's really hard to truly extrapolate where they're actually going. So I think that at least that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And there's precedent for that, right? Like, for example, remember when they showed us that very early concept art for Skyward Sword?
That's exactly what I was going to bring up. Was that exact thing? Yeah.
And there's actually a more recent example when they showed the SOS for Splatoon. And people were like, what is this for?
Yeah.
And it was for Splatoon 3.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that gives an idea of timeline of release, right? Do you guys remember when that SOS for Splatoon came out? Was it the beginning of last year or the year before?
No, that was more recent. I feel like that was more around late summer, maybe early fall-ish, 6, 7, 9 months
ago. So the
ago?
SOS was like a celebration of a new year. So I'm just trying to remember if it was like January
okay. Maybe it was
2021 longer. Or January of 2020. Either way,
I don't think it was 2020. It was definitely 2021 if that's the case, because I know it was more recent than that.
Well, 2020 was the beginning of 2020 was like when COVID hadn't really quite.
Yeah, it was a mystery at that time. It was like kind of just like a rumbling you were hearing. It was only happening in China, and all three of us live in the States here, and so
I don't know.
Yeah, tough call.
Sorry.
No. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah,
no, you're fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I'm not sure when that came out, but either way, there's definitely precedent from Nintendo to use concept art and tease future games. They've done that. That's not like it's been done. So we're not crazy to think that there is some sort of suggestion or tease of what this is, but it may be very broad, right? So in the example of the SOS for Splatoon, okay, it suggests that the Salmonids need help, and what we see in Splatoon 3, there's a Salmonid that's kind of like your partner for the campaign. That's Splatoon 3. So there is a hint there, but it doesn't like tell you like every single little gameplay detail, right? Mm-hmm. And then in the case for the Skyward Sword one, well, we kind of surmised it was somehow related to the Master Sword of this weird blue character, and we were right. But that was, so it gives us a vague understanding of where the story may be headed. And if we take a look at this, there's a darkness, so I think it implies, atmospheric, fearful, and I think we're onto something with a shadow, to be totally frank with you. I think it is.
You're pretty bought in on the shadow idea.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of it's a common trope for the Metroid series to have some sort of dark counterpart.
Yep, it sure is.
And I'm not saying it's going to be straight up another humanoid thing, but I think there is something dark beyond there's something beyond just Samus there. I feel like.
And also this is not a picture of like a cartoon Samus standing on like a 2D background. This is a 3D render. It's actually pretty detailed. You can tell they put a lot some work into this. So their goal, I think, is to set a tone for where this game is going to head to, at the very least, I think.
Yeah,
I agree with you. I definitely think that if we focus on the counterpart aspect of Samus, of Metroid Prime, of this exact image, the reason I also buy into that stuff kind of goes back to stuff I myself have been saying really since the game was also revealed, and I touched on it earlier here too, and it's how I just really believe I am personally all in on how this game will have to be continuing elements and story beats and narratives from the prior games. And I think that sometimes gets lost in the conversation with a lot of folks. And I even understand why, because to be fair, we haven't seen anything about the game. The game was just an idea from 5 years ago, almost 5 years ago, and I think people just think of it as such a broad concept. Metroid Prime 4, it's a game, we'll see it eventually. People like me and Dave and Andres and us here, we think about it a little bit more in depth and more personally and really dive deep with our knowledge and fanship of the series. So every time I think to myself about Metroid Prime 4 as a game, I always think about what came before it. And so there is almost no doubt in my mind that the concepts of the Space Pirates and the Metroid Prime entity and Phase-On specifically, which I know I brought up several times, I am 99% sure it's going to be playing an element to the story. It's not going to be Metroid Prime 4 and feel nothing like the 3 games before it. Just like when some folks have theorized in the past that maybe Metroid Prime 4 is going to be third person. And I mean, nothing is ever impossible. We don't truly know until Nintendo and Retro shows it to us. But you'll never convince me that that's what they're going to do. I mean, it's going to be first person because it's not Metroid Prime spin-off. It's Metroid Prime number 4. So I think the gameplay style, I think the visual style and the art direction and the architecture, and I think the story beats and the idea of a dark counterpart and all these things is going to continue. Whether or not Dark Samus can come back, I'm a little iffy on that. Boy, I want it, though, because I freaking love Dark Samus. But I think that you could resurrect a Metroid Prime entity. There is the theory about the stolen Metroid that Sylux has that you brought up, Andres, and it's a good theory, and I think there could be something to that. And you could reintroduce a new Metroid Prime entity without Dark Samus being involved. Because Dark Samus was created just out of happenstance at the end of the first game. Dark Samus didn't exist just because Metroid Prime existed. So a new Metroid Prime doesn't bring along Dark Samus by default. So there's a great chance that Metroid Prime and the Space Pirates playing with Phase-On comes back big time in Prime 4. I personally believe it will. And I don't know how they could go back with the Dark Samus thing. I just don't know. So I wonder if
add a revelation.
Okay, go ahead if you have one right now.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm curious.
Okay,
Go for it, man.
So,
yeah.
All right, I'm just gonna say it. Cannot be wrong, obviously, but that's Sylux.
You think this character is Sylux we're looking at?
That the reason that shadow doesn't match Samus is because that's a shadow of Sylux.
Oh, I see.
I'm okay with that. If you think that the character is
it's kind of like long, angular sort of limbs, I don't know. I mean, it could be that, and it would make sense, right? Like if Retro Studios months from now said, "Oh yeah, that was Sylux," we would all believe it 100%, right? Like there wouldn't be any
I agree with you.
doubt that shadow would match that.
Yeah.
So that's what I think it is, because I agree with you. I don't think Dark Samus should come back. I think Dark Samus should be done. I like the idea of a new Metroid Prime, maybe with a different type of personality and ferocity to it, from a Metroid. But the humanoid rival, I think, should be Sylux, because we already know Sylux is following Samus. He stole a Metroid egg. Kensuke Tanabe has told us that he wants Sylux to play a role in this story in interviews. So
it's all but guaranteed, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah,
really. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think that I like that idea, and that goes back to forgive me, I keep referencing videos because I've made 2,000 videos about this game since it was announced. But another theory I know I've put out a couple times on live streams and videos is how I think Sylux could play a role in this game while still making it be a true sequel to Metroid Prime 3 and stuff. And to your point, Andres, if Sylux is in the game, like I think all three of us think he will be, he very easily and perfectly fill the exact same role that Dark Samus did in the first 3 games. Mostly in Primes 2 and 3. Dark Samus wasn't even in Prime 1. But the way Dark Samus fit into 2 and 3 as the main humanoid ongoing foil that Samus runs into multiple times across her journey, but Dark Samus never truly became the final enemy for her to defeat, right? And so I feel like a new Metroid Prime entity could still exist as that final entity or the final big boss, whatever it might be, in this game or a new series of games, if that's what they're setting up. And Sylux could be that character that is set up early on as like, I finally caught up with you after all this time, Samus, and I'm coming for you, and I've helped create this new Metroid Prime. I'm working with the space pirates, and Samus is like, holy crap, this sucks. I have to fight you. And so maybe we run into Sylux 2 or 3 times, and including a final defeat before then moving on to the new final boss, like a Metroid Prime or what have you.
Yeah,
it might feel a little bit repetitious, but go ahead.
Yeah, you remember they had we've been going over their hirings a lot for the past few years, and the story writer they hired was from the one who wrote the Jedi Fallen Order. So I do think there's going to be some spoken dialogue in this game, like maybe quite a bit even. So Sylux, if he is in the game, I expect him to be probably a dynamic, purposeful main villain, basically, and he has like a really like strong goal to, in purpose in this game against Samus, and they'll try to make that dynamic work probably, and which means Samus will probably have some spoken dialogue as well, and I think they can explore that a lot more, and they can still keep the atmosphere very much Metroid, because they can handle that in some cutscenes and stuff like that. But I've talked about this before, but Metroid as a series, obviously this game is looking like they're going like way up there. They're going for the gusto here. Like they're going for the ultra high quality. Let's go for it. They're going for the cinematic look. So Metroid is going to have to evolve. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot more spoken dialogue, a lot more cinematic type of events in this game to match the type of style they're going for. I don't think it's just going to be all completely quiet and nothing going on at all, as far as like the story is concerned, because of what they've hired. It looks like they're going all out on the story as well. So I'm really, really excited to see Sylux and what his part is. And because Dark Samus never talked, of course. So I do think if he is in the game, he's going to have a lot of spoken dialogue, and there's going to be a lot of like dramatic events that take place. Plus, it's going to be a contrast to the gameplay that you're going to have. Obviously, when you're playing the game, most likely it's going to be very a lot of isolation. It's going to have those moments when you don't hear anything. Obviously, right? It's all quiet, and you can do that really well in these types of games. If and this game has obviously been in the works for quite a long time. I think we can trust Retro Studios is going to hit it out of the park.
I agree.
I think you're on the money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Andres.
They already kind of broke the voice acting barrier with Metroid Dread, right? I mean, technically we've seen other things, but like in modern day, right? And I think most of us were really okay with how they handled voice acting in Dread. They handled it really well. But I mean, at the end of the day, the voice acting was maybe very minimal. I mean, I think it should stay relatively minimal. But Prime 4, I think we also agree, has a much larger budget than Dread, right? When assuming all things are equal, that may also scale proportionally to a lot more voice acting. So, still relatively minimal within the entire scope of the game, because should be more of an isolationist, atmospheric sort of experience, but there still will be those moments, to your point, Dave. And, actually, they can even follow the formula of Dread, right? Like, just Dread, but in 3D. Like, that's not... I don't think it can be done. And
I think that's kind of the direction...
that's kind of where they're headed.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the direction they're going. And I love the idea that you said, Dave, of Sylux really being able to be a dynamic, nuanced character, which would require that voice acting and more of a cinematic approach in cutscenes. Going with what they did from Dread and taking it to kind of a newer, higher, bigger budgeted level, right? Exactly. And I think it's worth noting, when we talk about the voice acting concept and just how much story and narrative and characters and voice acting we might hear in this game, everyone, I think when they hear Metroid and voice acting, the first thing they do is they go to Other M. And even though I'm a big fan of the game, and I think you guys have different varying levels of finding it to be good or okay or whatever, I actually don't think about Other M when I first think about voice acting in this game. I go to Metroid Prime 3, even before I go to Dread. People forget there is a ton of voice acting in Metroid Prime 3, way more than there is in Metroid Dread. And again, that's more directly relevant to Prime 4 because it's Prime 3. And so, obviously, Dread handled it spectacularly well. I mean, we all had that nerdgasm moment when she spoke back to Quiet Robe, and it was incredible. But again, outside of the Atom AI computer on her ship, there's no English in the game. Everything else is in a different language. and it was great for adding into the atmosphere and the setting and tone of Dread. But I think in Prime, the Prime series, and Other M, of course, is all English as well. But in Prime 3, I think it's worth noting the template that they set in that game, where Samus never spoke. She filled the role of Link in the Zelda games, where she never spoke. But in that game, every other character around her did. Whether it was the whether it was the captain, whether it was the 3 bounty hunters, the different Galactic Federation soldiers that you talked to, or the Aurora unit, which constantly spoke to you throughout that game. And so there's a lot of voice acting and narrative that comes at you in that game without the need for cutscenes. Prime 4 will probably have cutscenes like Metroid Dread and Other M, and I think we're all really excited to see how they handle that. And honestly, I mean, maybe this is the Other M fan in me, but I am personally not afraid for them to make Samus talk in this game. And we should start wrapping this up, but I think this is one of the last main things we can talk about. I'm really not afraid for her to talk in this game. I was never horribly offended with how they did it in Other M. I do think they would need to be more careful to avoid backlash if they do it in this game. I can agree with that. But I think it's not impossible that she talks, and I personally would welcome it. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I personally, I think it'd be totally fine if she talks, because they can handle it. They can handle it in a similar way like they did with the Tomb Raider reboot stuff. Like obviously lessened, but like they can handle in that way where you actually have a very strong Samus, and she's able to carry her own conversation in the cutscenes and everything like that, and respond to dialogue. But they can handle it just great doing that. It doesn't have to be like Other M. So like it's just because
way
Other
less
M is
talking
the only,
than Other M.
Yeah, Other M is the only example people have, so they get afraid of it. But like, this is not this. This is a totally different developer, different game completely. And Metroid Prime 3 was not like that anyway. So like, I'm happy with them either going with the Metroid Prime 3 route where she doesn't say anything, everyone else talks, or giving her like a set piece of dialogue as well. I think it could work either way.
Andres, what do you think?
How do you guys feel about them hiring maybe Nikki Garcia to play, I guess in a way sort of reprise her role, but in Prime 4 as opposed to Dread?
I mean, I would love it. Obviously,
that'd be cool.
Yeah, if she's comfortable doing it, and obviously, speaking in English, not in Chozo. I think that would be fantastic. And I will say, before I give you more runway here, Andres, like I think that it would be great to have her talk, again, only in cutscenes, like you were saying, Dave. And even though, again, I like Other M and how they did it for the most part, I think in Prime, if she talks, it should be significantly less often. There's no doubt in my mind. For Prime, like, I don't need her thinking every thought out loud to herself. Like,
Right.
I think it worked fine in that one weird experiment game, but I don't think it would work in Prime 4. I mean, unless they somehow made it work. But my feeling going into it is Samus can talk. I kind of want her to talk, but it needs to be few and far between, personally. So, Andres, do you have any other kind of thoughts on that?
I mean, I think we're all on the same wavelength here. Like, we think she should talk, but it's got to be kind of like, she's got to be a woman of few words, right? But when she does talk, it's significant.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like how they handle it in Dread. Now, I think probably a little bit more than Dread, because Dread, it was like, one line and then the scream of all screams. So maybe a little bit more than that, because Prime's probably going to be a little bit of a longer game, so probably a few more moments for that to happen. But yeah, I mean, I'm on the same page, like, just minimal, but there. Enough. So if there is a conversation, it's not like a monologue on one end and a mute on the other, right? That's one of my problems with how they handle Breath of the Wild, because it was great to see all these other characters talking, but because Link would not talk, the conversations were awkward because they weren't actually conversations. They were monologues, assuming it was a conversation. So yeah, I think there should be a response coming from Samus if someone is talking to her, but
there's a chance.
Choice words.
Yeah, choice words. And I mean, the Zelda comparison makes sense. I feel that. The only thing is, I hate to admit it, but honestly, Nintendo's probably going to be gun shy. to make her talk at all. I think we were even lucky to have that line of dialogue in Dread. It was the right call, but I think we were lucky because the sad truth is, as much as I enjoy Other M for the most part, it's an 8.5 to me out of 10. It's not perfect. There's problems, but I like it. There's no doubt that backlash is going to sting probably for a long time for them. It breaks my heart to say. So I think, there's probably more chance she won't talk than she will. But to our other points, I think that NPCs probably will talk to her. So last thing, let's wrap up with this last question so we can kind of get out of here in the next 10 or 15 minutes here. The big question, when do we think, based on this sudden thing that just came out today, when do we think we will see the game? Do you guys think this is telling us that we will see the game this year? Do you think that this is saying we're going to see it at E3 or a different direct later in the year or beforehand alongside of Prime Trilogy or whatever, or are they going to save it for the Game Awards randomly, whatever? When do you guys think, and Andres, I'll ask you first here, when do you think, now that this exists, that we'll probably see the game officially?
So, before this, right, I was on the school of thought that Prime Remake is going to look amazing. Because so assuming though all the rumors are true, right, and then this has been discussed by Emily Rogers and Jeff Grubb and Nate the Hate, like they all have sort of said the same thing, that this has been in development for like 3 years, the Prime Remake, not Prime 4. And if that's the case, and I'm assuming this is kind of like a fairly ambitious remaster, right, which means it's going to be a looker, at least for Switch standards. So it's going to be impressive, and with that in mind, there may not even be really like a big need to like showcase Prime 4 if Prime 1's already looking like pretty awesome, But assuming that is still happening this year, assuming that is all true and actually happening, I would assume that gets announced at E3, assuming E3 is not canceled. But say a summer direct, right? Just so we can kind of, assume all possibility.
And you're talking about a Prime 1 remake right now, right? Not Prime 4?
I'm talking about a Prime 1 remake getting a reveal in a summer direct, probably E3, right?
Okay.
But with that comes the perhaps strong need to at least mention Prime 4, right? It's like, hey, look, development's going on. Basically exactly what they did last year's E3, where they announced Dread, but they also mentioned Prime 4. They may do it again, but this second time when they mention it, it may be more than just a mention, right? Maybe they give us a little bit more of a tease. So with this concept art, it actually kind of strengthens my hope that it's not just a, hey, Prime 4 development is going well. It might be more of a, hey, here's a quick teaser, But again, because of Prime Remake, assuming that is happening, I wonder how much of Prime 4 they would actually want to show off at E3. So that's kind of like, it's tough. I don't know if they would show off both, like with a lot of footage. But
it does sound like you ultimately think before 2022 is over, we will have maybe seen something official, even if it's like really short or really small. I
mean, you know how things are with Nintendo, right? Like sometimes they make us feel like something is right around the corner, and then it is, but it isn't, right? Like for example, with the Splatoon SOS thing, it happened. Like we were getting Splatoon 3, like it was clearly in development and it was close. But not as close as we perhaps would want, right? So I don't want to like be 100% all in, but I definitely think that this is a 100% sign, and I feel like Nintendo has greenlit Retro Studios. I think this is all a part of a big sort of build-up, So I just think the floodgates are opening for Metroid information. Like Metroid Dread was the beginning. Now we see this concept art, and we have the free Dread DLC. I think there's going to absolutely be some sort of cool Metroid announcement at E3, whether it's Prime Trilogy, Prime Remake, a Prime 4 teaser, or some combination of that. The question is, if specifically Prime 4, I'm more inclined to say that Prime 4 will show up at E3 now with the concept art than before. Mm-hmm. And I feel like if you extend that to just in 2022, it's pretty likely. And if you extend that to by E3 2023, it's like 99.99%. Yeah.
Okay, Dave, what do you think?
Yeah, I think this was Retro Studios getting the green light, basically, or kind of like showing people that, hey, we're we're ready to show something of this game, and we're getting ready to do that. And here is some little tease that we got
Something to chew on.
something coming here, and it's not, it really is going to happen. So it's like, if they're showing this now in February, I think that we have a really good chance of getting a teaser trailer at E3, maybe as a one more thing kind of thing, as a future game to look forward to in 2023 after they announce like the remaster of the original. That I can see that easily happening at E3 for them. And if not, then maybe in the September Direct.
Yeah, all good points. I have no problem saying that to me, this is all but a confirmation. So I'll, cliched 99.9% chance that we're seeing this game this year. Kind of building off some of what you guys both said, the green light idea. To me, this was Retro Studios and Nintendo collectively saying the time is now. Like, this is real. They're saying, okay, it's time for us to acknowledge this game. You guys have all waited. We had the amazing reveal of our most recent Metroid game, the first one in so long, last year. It came out, so it's behind us. Everyone loved it. All of the plans and the hype and the marketing for that to be the initial return of Metroid and Samus is now done and behind us. But this other, bigger budget, higher scoped game that people have been waiting for longer, based on when it was confirmed, waiting longer for this next game, Metroid Prime 4, now is the time, And yes, conveniently, it's only 4 months before E3 happens, so it's hard not to, focus our attention on E3. Like, when is the ideal time to reveal one of your biggest and most hyped games ever, or at least in the Switch era? It's obviously E3. I'm not totally putting my money on E3, even though I overall expect it. But what I do think is, we're going to see this game this year. And, it could be something as minimal as like official art and just a screenshot of Samus or something. But I think it's more than likely, a small teaser with gameplay or even a full-on minute to 2 minute trailer. And an announcement like, here is the game. If there's a subtitle to the game, which I think there will be, they will announce the subtitle. And we will probably get the typical thing where at the end of the trailer, it's going to fade in and say 2023 or whatever year, they want to tell us is the target first year, even though that may shift around, right, as time goes on. I really absolutely feel more than ever that, like, the game is real. And I think this was a purposeful decision. We're going to show people what is undeniably Samus. We're going to do it in the most Nintendo subtle way by just updating a banner, knowing everyone is going to see it and get excited. It's Nintendo does a lot of stupid boneheaded things with some of their business decisions or their bad marketing here and there. But when they really want to nail something, they turn on their smartest marketing machine button and they do something like this. And to me, that's what this signifies. Like, it's time to generate hype in that perfect way. And I think that's what this is doing. And whether it's E3 or in a direct like in September, I think, like Dave, you said, I am all in. We're seeing Metroid Prime 4 this year. I think the time is finally now. So
yeah, I agree, and I think we're kind of seeing it right now, even a little bit here.
We are. Yeah, it's crazy. I still can't get over it. Like I said earlier on, like when I zoom in and I'm like, that is just Metroid Prime Samus. There's no doubt in my mind, And the shadow thing gets exciting, and the hallway and the lights and the color, like, it's all really exciting, and it could be telling us a lot about the game. But I just see Metroid Prime Samus in that Metroid Prime Various suit, and I'm just like, this is it, baby. Like, it's finally coming at us.
It's very intentional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It is very intentional. Also, I don't want to extend this any longer, but something else I noted. One last thing. When I look at the picture zoomed out again, am I crazy in thinking that it looks like, I don't know if that's a lighter blue, those little triangle things. Do they kind of look like eyes to you? Do you guys see what I don't know if I can, I wish we were screen sharing so I could show you what I'm looking at.
When I first saw it, I thought, is this like a visor or look or something? I mean, I think it's just like sidewalls, and they're just really up close.
Oh, I think that is what they are, but I'm saying, are they maybe designed?
But is it meant to be like subtly
placed
also
in
reference
a way.
that?
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, this is art. It's subjective, but
it's very possible.
Yes.
But it does look like kind of like an evil eye thing. I don't know if it's intentional, but it definitely sort of. If the intent of this picture is to not only showcase Samus for the first time as kind of like her return in the Prime form, but also subtly hint at a darker nemesis, then regardless like those eyes kind of play to that, regardless if they're actually eyes or not.
Yep. Yeah. To me, it's like, if we're going to analyze the shadow and every angle on the shadow that way, it's like, man, I can look at those things and I see eyes. So maybe we're wrong all across the board, or maybe we're picking up on something that's real, right? Like Dave, I think...
maybe this is just a Metroid party game.
Oh, don't you dare. Don't you dare. I'm not ready for a Metroid. It's going to be 1-2 Metroid Prime.
Nintendo Switch Sports expansion pack.
No.
Or a Samus Amiibo Festival.
I hate it all. I hate it, and I hate you guys for even
Actually, it's
saying
going to be a compilation of
man.
all three of those.
Oh, gosh. I'm going to have nightmares now. Okay, well, I think we can wrap up. I know it's time, at least for me, to wrap up. So I think we got a good-spirited hour-long chat. This was so much fun.
Awesome.
Yeah, some real Metroid stuff to chew on, man. And it was really fun to be able to kind of have Andres have you sort of see it for the first time while we recorded at the beginning there.
It was like an emergency meeting.
And I gotta tell you, like, there's been so many... we've covered a lot. There's more. There's so much we could, like, extrapolate from this. And it may all be baloney, but... we could talk about this.
Well, we're
going to be talking about this for months.
Yeah, until we see something. Yeah. And you're so right on the baloney thing.
Yeah.
That's the whole joke. Like, did we just spend an hour literally overthinking this thing? Maybe, but who cares? Because it's fun. And if we make our own individual videos, are we making videos about nothing? Maybe, but it's fun. And I think that we feel like this is something real anyway. So I think that we're all onto something. I feel pretty good about, what we theorized today. So. This is great. Some real Metroid stuff finally coming at us. So I will say thank you, Dave, and thank you, Andres, for being on the show. I will remind you guys that their channels are linked below. Definitely subscribe to both. Like I said at the beginning, I'll remind you here. I think the three of us are good overall resources for Metroid and Nintendo chat on YouTube. We all spend a lot of time doing that stuff. And so... yeah, I guess I'll say that's it. We'll wrap this up. So thanks again, Dave and Andres. Thanks for everyone for watching, and we will enjoy some Metroid hype until then. So, bye-bye.